Us this evening. Today is our first online talk in this new series. My name's Maya Bambrick. I'm on the SOS Council, and today I'll be your host. Today we're joined by Jenny Shelton of the RSPB. Would you like to introduce yourself, Jenny?
Hi, yes, thanks, Maya. I'm Jenny. I work for the investigations team at the RSPB. I have done so for 6 years, and I work on the sort of promoting the amazing work they do, essentially. I'm the communications officer for that team.
Great, thank you very much. Would you like to start your talk?
Well, let's dive straight in.
Great, thank you very much.
I will share my screen. Thanks everyone already for coming. And here we go. All good?
All good.
Splendid. Right, so I am going to be talking to you today about the work we do, the work of the investigations team, what we do and why we do it. So our main aim essentially is this, to help detect and investigate crimes against wild birds, namely birds of prey. So I've worked in this area for many years now, and it's certainly the most interesting, if at times very shocking, and frustrating subject matter to be dealing with on a daily basis. I know it's an area many of you will know a bit about already and feel as strongly as we do about it. It's worth saying at this point that there are going to be images of dead and injured birds in the presentation, so I just wanted to give you that as a warning. So what is raptor persecution? This short film, which I'm going to play for you now, sums it up. It's a couple of years old, but the message remains the same.
Here in the UK, birds of prey are under constant threat of being deliberately and illegally shot, trapped, or poisoned. Each week, the RSPB receives reports of birds like peregrines and red kites being killed. But how many more go unreported and undetected? For the rare and beautiful hen harrier, persecution is a major threat to their survival as a species in England. Only 3 pairs bred here in 2017. The hen harrier is known as the ghost of the moor, and it risks becoming one if this continues. Bird of prey persecution is a national disgrace, and we're urging the government to end it. Please share, be our eyes and ears, and help restore birds of prey to our skies.
That was something we launched with our bird crime report in 2017 as a way of, well, trying to draw attention to the issue really and sum it up in a nutshell for people who perhaps didn't know what it was, as is still the problem really, is it's a sort of hidden issue. Not many people have heard of this outside of, nature or birding circles. So yeah, my job really is to do something about that. And by engaging people, of course, inspiring action, and also making sure that it gets under the noses of the people that matter, who may be able to make some more sort of seismic changes.
Here in the UK, birds of prey
playing that again. Let's change slide. So here we go. Here's the team. Well, some of them anyway. So for the first time, actually, the investigations team now covers the whole of the UK. We've got 15 staff working across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. We've got 3 main focus areas, which are fieldwork, intelligence, and media. So the field workers go out and monitor sort of problem areas where our data tells us there are issues, or they may have had reports coming in. They're often places that they have been several times, very familiar with, certain moors. You can imagine they're sort of upland areas, but there are increasingly now incidents happening in the lowlands too, and sort of the pheasant partridge issue is sort of rearing its head, which I'll go into a little bit more later in the talk. What exactly do we do? Well, we assist police investigations. We don't actually have any capacity to take prosecutions ourselves, but we support and provide expertise and guidance. Many of our staff have got upwards of 20 years experience in this really quite a niche field, which very few police officers have, or even wildlife crime officers for that matter. Surveillance, which I mentioned, these guys will be, see top right, there's Jack. He's out on one of the moors, watching possibly a hen harrier roost at that moment in time, to see if there's any disturbance occurring, monitoring moors, keeping an eye. I mean, it's quite rare that we're in the right place at the right time to catch something actually happening, but it has happened. But yeah, more often than not, it's sort of having a route around in these sort of areas where we know there's some dodgy dealings going on. They often look for illegal traps, and then one of the really successful methods actually of gathering evidence is by putting in remote cameras by a trap, and then sort of running that footage back later. And we have caught people in the past by viewing that footage. We've observed crimes taking place. We also fit satellite tags to hen harriers. This is a really, really increasingly important way of finding out what's happening to these really vulnerable birds. We take calls from the public as well. So reports of potential crimes will come in to us via our intelligence team, and they will form a rapport with the informant, get in touch with the police, and potentially that will be the start of an investigation. We also manage the UK's only raptor persecution database, so our data that we're collecting is really, really important because it's the only database of its kind. We also arrange for x-rays and post-mortems to be done for dead birds, and as I mentioned, awareness raising, which is increasingly important. So the main risks to raptors are shooting, trapping and poisoning, some disturbance and nest destruction, and egg collecting to a lesser extent. These are things, certainly the first three, that our team deals with day in, day out. Shooting is unfortunately the most common means of killing birds of prey illegally. Some birds have been found with historic shot, meaning they've been shot once and then survived only to be shot again. I saw an x-ray once of a red kite which had upwards of 10 pieces of shotgun pellets in its body, and some of those were actually historic, and the body had started to heal around it. So it's amazing how resilient these birds are, but yeah, really sad when you see these things. Spring traps are particularly gruesome. These act kind of like a giant mouse trap. It's been illegal for over 100 years to set a trap like this out in the open. As you can imagine, it does some really, really terrible damage to a bird's foot if it lands on a post, which it may, use for perching or plucking. The trap just closes around its leg. You might have seen an image a few years ago, actually, of an eagle flying around with a trap attached to its leg, which was really horrendous. Sadly, this peregrine didn't survive being caught in that particular trap. And then poisoning. Poison baits are being used to kill raptors. So this will be a prey species like a rabbit, we've got there, or a hare, or a pheasant, or a piece of meat, which is laced with some sort of rodenticide or pesticide, and it most often kills the bird instantly. Of course, the problem with poisons, they're completely indiscriminate. These are not just a risk, an illegal risk to wildlife, but also any person or pet that might come across them. And we've seen these being laid in really public areas, tourist hotspots, dog walking areas. This is just a huge irresponsible problem, really. You'll also, I'm sure, know about the white-tailed eagle, the one in the centre picture there, which was found in Dorset, containing 7 times the lethal dose of a particular rodenticide called brodifacoum. This is actually the strongest rat poison on the market, and it's increasingly rearing its head in raptor crime cases. So, as a science-based organisation, we're intelligence-led, and everything is backed up by data. We share this data after we've gathered it in an annual report every year, which is the bird crime report, which comes out in the autumn. And it publicises the confirmed incidents from the previous year. So confirmed means where a body or a trap has been found, confirming a crime has taken place. So last year 2021, there were 80 confirmed incidents just in England. And that was the second highest figure we've ever recorded after 2020's unprecedented high. So this is clearly an issue that's not going away. And of course, there'll be many more which simply go unreported and unrecorded. The bird crime report inevitably gets national media pickup, which is great for us because we're able to get this message out there. It helps keep the issue on the agenda and in the papers. Why is this happening? Well, you won't be surprised to hear, I'm sure, that 2/3 of the incidents in bird crime 2021 were found to be in connection with game bird shooting in some shape or form. This is where birds of prey pose or are seen as a threat by some to game bird stocks. All wild birds are protected by law under the Wildlife and Countryside Act. However, as the figures show, this is clearly not deterring some people. The RSPB is not anti-shooting at all, but all businesses need to operate legally and sustainably, and have to be challenged if not. So what we believe is that illegal killing, unfortunately, is deeply rooted within this industry, and the practices involved with managing very large, intensive, especially grouse moors, to support these huge numbers of birds to be shot are naturally under increasing scrutiny. The Raptor Crime Map Hub is something we launched fairly recently, actually, and it's really good to visualise sort of where this is happening. And you can see the little black squares. You might be able to just see there's a cluster of black squares around the Yorkshire Dales, the North York Moors. There's a few around the sort of the Dark Peak as well, Peak District, and then lots up in the sort of Highlands and Uplands of Scotland. So these are the sort of known hotspots where we sort of focus a lot of our attention. And this is going back since 2007. You can see these are corresponding with, these upland areas of the UK. But lowland shoots, as I said, are also a problem. So we're starting to see counties like Norfolk, Dorset, and Wiltshire showing high numbers of confirmed incidents. So we're sort of looking as well at pheasant and partridge. I think this is clearly an area that's going to need more scrutiny and more investigating, because of course we've got the issue of the 60 million non-native pheasants being released every year into the countryside, which is not going to have any small amount of effect on native wildlife. And then in the uplands, you've got the damage caused by burning on deep peat. So really, as an industry, this does need to evolve for the sake of shooting as well, really. You can see here that actually half the pie, this darker wedge, is pheasant and partridge. So these are the incidents relating to game bird shooting, and the total blue, almost sort of 3/4 there, show the fact that there's a large majority of these incidents related to game bird shooting. There's many reasons that more of these perhaps might be on pheasant and partridge rather than red grouse. Possibly it's easier to detect in lowland areas. Maybe it's slightly less remote. Might be a higher density of people to see and report these crimes. It's possible that less care is taken to hide the crimes. We know that in some grouse estates are running highly sophisticated and coordinated efforts to kill raptors and remove any evidence of this. It might be that we're just catching the people who are sort of running less coordinated efforts in these sort of lowland areas. Yes, we'll have a look at some of these recent high-profile cases which have emerged recently, which you may be familiar with already. I know you guys are based a bit further south than this, but just one recent one here in Norfolk. You can see the pheasant bait on the right, which has been laced with a poison, and one of 5 buzzards that succumbed to that. The gamekeeper was pleaded guilty to killing 6 buzzards and 1 goshawk, and to the placing of poison baits, and the illegal release of game birds on a special protected area, which is actually a first. So that's quite an interesting area, I think, which we'll see more of. I was actually in court for that. It's quite an interesting experience to go along and see the defence argument and the prosecution, and the sort of verdict of the magistrates. In court, they said the buzzard was destroying his livelihood, and that because he had had good character and no previous convictions, the fine was just over £1,000. You might have seen this one as well. The police put out a public appeal after 5 dead goshawks were found apparently dumped in a forest car park in the Suffolk. It's quite an odd one, this one, actually. Still haven't found who's done it. All of them contain shot, and they're all juveniles. You can see there from the plumage. They're actually young birds from last summer, I think. So the police officer who was investigating, he tweeted inviting anybody from the shooting community to come and help solve the case. And it was quite interesting, the response from Basque. They actually asked the police to take that tweet down, saying that it was pointing the finger. So yeah, unfortunately, there's not always a huge amount of cooperation in trying to sort of root out these criminals within the sort of shooting communities. I mean, these birds have been shot, so clearly it was someone who has a shotgun license or is shooting. So it wasn't probably a huge stretch to ask the shooting community to help out. Anyway, still, at least the word is out, and actually there's now a reward for information, which is nearing 1,500, which is amazing, thanks to Wild Justice and Bird Guides, who set up a crowdfunder. So yeah, really great to get that message out, and the public's on side. There's no argument with this. These are protected birds. They shouldn't be killed. That's the end of it, really. And then just last week, a gamekeeper, Paul Allen, was fined and given a suspended jail sentence for the possession of several shot buzzards and a number of poisons, which were found in his yard. Many of them are banned. And one of these poisons was actually the same poison that had killed the white-tailed eagle, which was found poisoned 10 months later on the same estate. Now, it's not to say that this guy has been responsible for that crime as well. We actually don't know where the eagle ingested the poison, but it had been in that area prior to death, certainly. But the telling thing, I think, the main thing about that story is the fact that the investigation was shelved. There was a search planned to find out more about how the eagle had died and maybe identify who might have done it. It was cut short and scrapped early, which was, strange, because the police did know that there was another investigation currently open in the same area. The rodenticide in question is a thing called Brodifacoum, and this, before 2016, was restricted to indoor use only, and now it can be used in and around buildings, which is a massive problem, because this is clearly how it's getting into eagles and into the food chain like this. We don't know if this is conscious abuse or misuse, but it is increasingly cropping up in raptor persecution cases. So this is a subject that our team is focusing quite a lot of attention on right now. And we're really hoping, and we've actually asked the government to change that law back so it can only be used indoors, which is far safer, and it will avoid eagles and anything else like that, hopefully, from succumbing. I think if there's no change, this is just going to keep on happening. So, as you know, raptor crime is affecting some of our most vulnerable and amazing species, one of which, of course, is the hen harrier. And there are a number of ways that we're tackling this. At a conservation level, paper on the Natural England satellite tagging data, it showed that criminal persecution is the main factor suppressing the hen harrier population. So again, clearly something needs to be done about this. 2022 was a successful breeding season in England, but the English population does remain considerably below what it should be. And of course, it's a good thing chicks fledging, but it's what happens to those chicks once they fledge. That risk of persecution is still very much there, and until that's removed, these young birds that are fledging every year aren't going to be safe, and they're not going to be recovering as a species to a self-sustaining level until persecution stops. So satellite tagging is a really, really great way of finding out what's happening to these birds. I actually saw some tagging taking place, and it was really fantastic seeing these birds up close. They have this amazing sort of gawping stare as you sort of find them crouching in the heather, and they're really small tags. They have to be fitted at just the right time when the bird is big enough to carry the tag, but not too big that it's going to run away. What the tags do is once the bird leaves the nest, it enables us to see where they go, and also it shows the temperature of the bird, which means if the bird has died, it will let us know, and then we can go and find out what's happened to that bird. Crucially, this bird here, this nice lady here, is Boland Betty. She was tagged in Lancashire several years ago now. Actually, you can see from the brown eyes that it's a female. The males, when they're that age, have more sort of grey eyes. Her tag suddenly stopped, so we went to investigate the last known location of the bird to see what happened. And sadly, she had been shot. Her tracker was still working amazingly, which was how we were able to find her. This was quite unusual, however. We don't usually find the bodies, or if we do, it's because they've died naturally. More often than not, the tag suddenly stops transmitting and we never find the tag or the bird again. But even this is useful information to have. And the more data we collect, the more we understand the problems these birds are up against, and then the more we can do to tackle them. A paper that I mentioned before, it showed that actually 72% of tagged hen harriers, of these ones studied, 17 were confirmed. Sorry, that's between 2007 and 17, I can't read my own tile, were confirmed as killed or illegally killed, and that a hen harrier was 10 times more likely to die or disappear within areas predominantly covered by grouse moor. So this is hard facts and hard science, really, and it just shows that satellite tagging is one of the most important tools for understanding and protecting these birds. So what needs to change? Well, we're putting pressure relentlessly on governments to introduce licensing for driven grouse shooting. This is something that's coming in Scotland this year, which will be really interesting to see the effects of that. But we think this needs to be happening across the UK, and it would enable a bit more accountability. I think at the moment, the owner of an estate bears no responsibility for the crimes of anybody working for them. For example, a gamekeeper. In Scotland, we do have vicarious liability, which means the employer takes the hit for the actions of their staff, which is, of course, a greater deterrent. We want to see these most intensive driven grouse moors licensed. And this license could be removed if a crime was found to be occurring. Of course, if you're a law-abiding estate, then this is absolutely no problem. We'd also like to see greater regulations for pheasant and partridge shooting. As I said, millions released each year is not sustainable. That needs to be reduced. And then the increase in incidents involving this particular rodenticide, brodifacoum, is a huge concern, and we've asked the Health and Safety Executive to restrict that to indoor use once more. Essentially, self-regulation from within the shooting communities has not succeeded, and governments have to step in now to enforce changes if these birds have any chance of escaping being illegally killed. But there is hope on the horizon with licensing coming in Scotland, and hopefully that might pave the way for changes of a similar nature throughout the rest of the UK. Raptor persecution, as I mentioned, has been the key focus of our team for the past decade or so, as this is where the biggest problem of sort of conservation level lies. But I'll just quickly touch on one more issue, and that is egg collecting. This is my boss. I think it's over 15 years ago now. He looks very young. And he's with, in his photograph, 6,000 eggs, all from one collection. The RSPB fought for wildlife crime, like egg collecting, to be punishable by jail. And in 2001, this happened. And with jail as a deterrent, egg collecting like this, in this sort of scale, became a thing of the past. So that was a huge win and had an almost immediate effect. So we hardly ever see collections of this scale anymore, which is great news because, you know, look at how many eggs there are, like how many potential birds. It's just awful. One question, the first question people ask me when they see things like this, why do people do it? It's completely baffling, isn't it? Why wouldn't you want to just appreciate a bird in the wild, alive, rather than sort of taking its egg and depriving it of life? It seems really bizarre to us. This sort of level of collecting, of course, is a world apart from that kind of, you know, a schoolboy with a robin egg and a biscuit tin. This is serious, obsessive behaviour. And the people who are doing this have no thought for the birds. And they all share a similar profile where they'll travel long distances to take the eggs. They'll take whole clutches, return when the bird has laid again and repeatedly take the clutch again. Egg collectors are invariably male and they keep their collections hidden. So these are not for show or for sale. So next really is to come on to how you guys make a difference. And it really can't be underestimated how much of a role you all play in sort of keeping eyes and ears out, letting us know, you know, reporting crimes. Most of the crimes that will end up in court have started with somebody picking up the phone because they've been out with their dog and they've seen, you know, a dead bird of prey at the side of the path and thought that looks a bit suspicious. I'm going to, you know, pick up the phone about that. The Dorset investigation, actually, that we were just looking at, the one with the shot buzzards on the same estate as the eagle was found, that began when a lady was out walking her dog. She found a dead red kite, phoned the police and phoned us, and it turned out the kite had been poisoned. And then the search of the area was able to be conducted. And then, of course, the stash of poisons and further buzzards were discovered and led to a conviction. So please do get in touch. The other thing, please talk to people about it. Use your voice. Talk to friends, talk to relatives about raptor persecution. You know, a lot of people still don't know that this is going on. Everyone, you know, sees the countryside and thinks it's, you know, a wonderful place. But, you know, this is it's a difficult subject to talk about. And I appreciate that because not everyone wants to know about the sort of darker underbelly to, you know, the green and pleasant land. Or, you know, ramp it up, contact your MP, sign petitions that you see, head on to Twitter. There's a huge kind of growing movement on Twitter for people like us, you know, of like minds who have just had enough of this issue really and want to use our voices in however way we can. And then, of course, support the RSPB, which I'm sure you do. If you're a member of the RSPB, you're already really helping the work of our team. There's only 15 of us, and we're doing, you know, say we, it's them out in the field that's doing the really amazing work, which no one else is really doing. But if you do want to support the team directly, you can do that as well if you search online for Bird of Prey Defenders Appeal. So yeah, we need to keep the pressure on really, and though it might take time to make changes, these things, you know, don't change overnight, unfortunately. By keeping on this pressure, we will turn the tide. I truly believe that there'll be a change for good in the end, and eventually, yeah, raptors can live free of persecution in the UK. And I always want to end on a slightly more cheerful note. Twitter came into its own last year when the Dorset Eagle story broke. In response to Chris Loder MP's comment that eagles aren't welcome, we thought, let's encourage people to share their love of eagles and other birds of prey. And the response was absolutely overwhelming. It just, you know, when you sometimes see something break through the normal kind of echo chamber and people who you don't maybe usually talk to about nature start telling you something, and you think, wow, this has really gone viral, essentially. People shared pictures of birds, they shared their love of birds, and quite a few famous people got in touch as well, and did the same. And that public show of support did not go unnoticed. The police got letters, and it really puts the pressure on. Our voices, especially when they're united like this, are incredibly powerful. And that brings me to the end of my talk. Here's how to get in touch if you do see a dead bird, or an injured bird of prey, or a suspected illegal trap. You see in this circle here, that's a crow cage trap. They can be used legally, but if you see a raptor inside, that could be a sign that something is untoward. It's worth picking up the phone, call the police, email us, and search online. We've got a whole kind of reporting form where you can fill in details of what you saw, when you saw it, do it as soon as you can. And yes, please spread the word. And thank you ever so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Jenny. That was a great talk, really fascinating. Yeah, it's such an important issue, so it's great that you're raising awareness for it. I mean, I'm in Bournemouth, so the Dorset investigations and everything that's been going on down here has been quite a topic amongst bird watchers down here especially, and it's quite shocking that, you know, you wouldn't think of Dorset as somewhere that could occur. So yeah, it's really important.
Oh, thank you.
We've got plenty of questions in the chat.
Hey, well, I haven't had a look. Let me see.
We'll start off with Keith Betton. Hi, Keith. So the first question is, how can bird watchers put pressure on police forces to take bird crime more seriously? I'm in Hampshire, where the wildlife crime team are great, but in many counties the police are more interested in chasing up tractor thieves than dealing with wildlife crime.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think it's a frustration a lot of us have. I mean, that sort of second to last slide that I put up actually is probably a good example of what you can do. I mean, you don't have to draw a picture of a bird and share it on Twitter, but getting in touch with the police is actually probably the best way of doing that, and making them aware that, you know, they're a public service and you're the public, so you want them to be following up these crimes. It's important. And yeah, most forces are great. We have a really good relationship, I'd say, with the majority of police around the UK. But yeah, it can't hurt if there's an issue to let them know, I'd say.
Great, thank you. Obviously, we know that the government's inaction is a bit of causing the problem, but Mark asked, what is the Labour Party's policy on this issue?
I think that the Labour Party announced their support of licensing. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure I've seen them come out in support of licensing of driven grouse moors. But yeah, we'll have to see if you know, if they ever get to implement something like that. But yeah, it's worth looking that up. And there's often instances where we will sort of either prompt people, or maybe Wild Justice will, to write to their MPs. And I know there's lots of local MPs, lots of local Labour MPs who are quite outspoken about raptor persecution, wanting to see it ended. So yeah, it's worth sort of keeping that on their agenda, and again, making sure as a constituent that you're that's a concern for you, and that you want them to be your voice in Parliament for that. I think it's worth probably, yeah, I suppose it shouldn't matter which party represents your particular area, but yeah, whoever they are, I'd write to them and yeah, tell them it's an issue.
Yeah, definitely. Mark's also asked, how many reports of persecution are from Sussex?
Now, I've got my bird crime report next to me open. I think Sussex had a few. I mean, it's difficult to compare really, because the numbers do sometimes look a bit low, but of course they're only sort of scratching the surface really. We don't know how many are actually going on. But if I just quickly look up Sussex. Oh no, I don't think they are in the top 10 for 2021. I'll tell you what, I can find probably that out online and then maybe send it to somebody later with more of a breakdown, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's great. Or we can, I mean, refer them to the bird crime report. It'll probably say in there,
Yeah,
won't it?
if you click on the appendices, particularly, that has the data in more detail, and it shows breakdown by county on that. So I'd yeah, have a look at that.
Great. Nigel's asked, presumably most raptor persecution happens on private land far from outside eyes. Are there any estimates of how much hidden persecution is? Is there much you can do in such cases? And then he's also asked, how much of a part does politics play in this? Is the RSPB's constitution helpful or a complication?
Really good question, actually. In terms of how much is happening on the scene, I mean, you just don't know. That's the trouble. It's such an unknown. All we can do is try and shine a light on those sort of darker areas, and that's something that satellite tagging does, because otherwise you'd never have found that, Bold and Betty or any of those hen harriers that have died as a result of persecution. It would just be another unknown. So yeah, trying to find to sort of shine lights in those unknown areas is really the best way. It's difficult to say how much is going on that we just don't know about, but I'd say quite a lot. When you look at the population of particular birds, you can see black holes in areas where grouse shooting occurs. For instance, like the Dark Peak used to be quite a sort of popular goshawk stronghold, but they've all since moved on. And yeah, same in Scotland. There's large sort of territories which used to be occupied by golden eagles, which are now no longer. So that gives you a slight insight into maybe what's happening that we just kind of never find out about.
Yeah, it's quite a bit saddening, really. But on to the next question. Are RSPB investigators ever threatened or attacked by those who target raptors?
Yeah, it's a certainly there's that risk every time they go out. What they tend to do is have a sort of cover story. So if they are approached by a gamekeeper, when they're out and about, they'll have a cover story as to why they're there, and they basically, their job is to not be seen. So if they're doing the job right, which they are, they will generally not be seen. But yeah, there have been occasions where they've been apprehended, maybe sort of someone's driven by and sort of eyeballed them in the vehicles when they've been there, or had slightly sort of less than friendly exchanges. I don't think there's ever been any sort of anything particularly serious, but it's certainly a consideration. But yeah, they basically try and stay out of their way. And yeah, if they're being as covert as they need to be, they will slip by unnoticed.
Great, thank you. Rory's
I have to say, before we move on, I was going to add actually the sort of verbal and sort of different type of threats that we've had. They come in different forms, and there have been personal attacks, not on me but on colleagues, which have come through, not sort of physical but verbal, and trying to discredit our data, or trying to sort of defame a certain character, and that's pretty nasty, and that's we have to get the big guns at the RSPB to step in when that happens.
I mean, even if you look on Twitter sometimes, I mean, the comments are just not good at all, really.
Yeah.
Rory's asked, what is the laws with shooting pheasants, or is there nothing protecting them in any form?
Do you mean the killing of pheasants, presumably?
Yeah, it looks like it, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're there to be shot, really. They're brought from, I think it's France or somewhere in Europe, for the sole purpose of being shot for sport. They're not a native bird, so yeah, I'm not sure what the licenses or the sort of actual laws around that are, but certainly it's legal in all these pheasant estates to be shooting the pheasants. That's not the problem per se. It's the persecution of the protected species, for instance the birds of prey, that goes hand in hand with that sport, that is where we focus our efforts.
Great. That's quite an interesting question. Does RSPB consider that the government is open to strengthening the law? What single change might be most effective?
Yeah, I think the most effective change would be accountability for the actual owners of the estate. Because at the moment, they can instruct their gamekeepers, as we believe is happening, to conduct these illegal actions. And if the gamekeeper is caught, they get a small fine, slap on the wrist. They might get expelled, moved on, and a new gamekeeper comes in. So the whole thing just repeats. And to break that chain, I think that cycle, it needs to be the accountability falls on the estate itself. If they have a financial incentive not to kill raptors, because that's essentially what it all comes down to. If it's not in their interest to kill raptors, then they won't do it. But currently, as it stands, they can sort of get away with it, really. And even if they are caught, it's a fairly small punishment for the most of the time. I think one person has ever been jailed. That was in Scotland for a raptor persecution offence. So it's kind of a hit worth taking for a lot of these places that are doing it. I'm not saying they're all doing it, but it's certainly something massive needs to change. I think that's the accountability side of it. So licensing of the estates, where they would lose their commercial license, so they could no longer have their income for a limited time. I think that would certainly make them think twice about committing crimes.
Following on from licensing, someone's asked, do you feel there is a sense that more vigour would be applied to this if bird shooting licences were more restricted? It seems astonishing how many licences are granted and how little justification this requires.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that's shotgun licence related. I'm not sure how that all works, to be quite honest, how those licenses are handed out. We do get occasions where it's peregrines being targeted potentially by sort of pigeon racers with those sort of interests. I'm not sure. Maybe if there was a tightening of those licenses, we'd see less of that. But yeah, certainly on these large estates, that's kind of part and parcel with the sport itself, and that's how they run. These guys are employed, they're given the best guns, and told to sort of conduct certain predator control, some of which unfortunately is not legal.
We've also had a question from Roy and Pat saying, do the crime maps show more detail of where the site's area so that the public can keep an eye on it in case there is a repeat?
Yeah, we actually we don't pinpoint too precisely. The sort of squares that come up on the map are 10k radius squares, so it keeps it fairly broad. I mean, it's certainly we want people to know where it's happening roughly. I think there are certain sort of limits as to how specific we can be, and until an actual crime has gone to court and concluded. If it's not been, if a perpetrator hasn't been actually found, we can't say specifically where it's been happening. But yeah, whenever I publish an appeal for information, for instance, we will say where it's taken place. It's just the map that I suppose is a bit broader than that. But yeah, if there's something in your area, I would hope it would get to you in some shape or form. You would hear about that. And it's really important because we want people to know, especially if they're out, walking their dogs. And that's also a responsibility of the police, really, to be issuing warnings to public health, so people know what's going on and what the potential risks are.
Thank you. Yeah, so Rob's also following on from about the Labour policy. Apparently, Shadow Environment Secretary Luke Pollard told the Independent Labour is in favour of licensing grouse shooting to ensure these habitats are managed responsibly and birds of prey are protected. He added, peat moor burning also causes environmental damage and is a huge threat to wildlife.
Yeah.
So that's
thanks for confirming that. Yeah, that's good to know. And, that's another issue, that the burning. I think, well, I wonder if that's actually what will drive the change, is actually the burning and the environmental issue, because it's perhaps a bit more tangible. People understand a bit more about climate change and the issues surrounding, setting fire to the moors. you know, the air quality, that, you know, how it affects people, all that kind of thing, flooding. So I wonder if that's actually going to be what eventually sort of turns the tide. Be interesting to see.
Definitely. Also, there was 16 incidents in Sussex in 2021. So
Oh,
that
thank
gives you
you.
an idea. 16.
Wow, that's quite high actually.
It
It's quite
is.
high.
Yeah, not high. Tony's asked, do you or the RSPB have a view on the work of the Committee Against Bird Slaughter?
Habs. Yeah, they work in Malta and Cyprus, I believe. Yeah, we work with them. One of our, well, now retired investigation officers has been out in Cyprus most years actually, trying to stop the illegal trapping of songbirds there, which is another horrendous issue. Yeah, I could do a whole other presentation about that, to be honest. The use of sort of lime sticks and really dreadful ways of catching these, you know, blackcaps and small birds to be sold for a sort of local dish where the bird is sort of eaten whole. Yeah, there's a lot of work being done out there, and yeah, cabs do a really good job.
Definitely. We've also had another question, off topic a little. Have you seen much bird flu in raptors?
Yeah, bird flu has cropped up in eagles now, I believe. It's crossed over to, yeah, a few raptors. They're all tested for AI, avian influenza, whenever we pick something up. So that's the other thing our field workers do. You know, every week it seems, really, they'll be out recovering the carcass of some sort of dead bird somewhere. And yeah, one of the checks now is to test it for avian influenza. Yeah, I mean, that certainly is affecting all birds now. So yeah, we'll have to be just hopeful that that goes away eventually. I think that's a really difficult one. I know the RSPB's done a good work on that, and I think raised quite a lot. The public were really generous in our appeal about avian influenza to enable more studies to take place. So yeah, it's just sickening to see all those images of the gannets and stuff, just as if wildlife isn't under enough pressure.
Yeah, horrible. I think we're nearing the end of our question, but I had one last one. How do we sort of get this issue across to the public? Because a lot of the time, these sort of things we're talking to the converted, but how do we sort of really, you know, get this topic out into the public to be able to, you know, raise awareness and get them to, you know, email their MPs and really, you know, get the topic out there?
Yeah, that's a really crucial part of what we need to do, actually, because it's no good sort of shouting into an echo chamber, because, you know, those people already know that it's a problem. It's getting to those other people. One of the ways that we're doing that is actually getting the issue in the sort of less conventional sort of wildlife and sort of nature publications. So places like, you know, the Telegraph, or for instance the Daily Mirror. We took out a journalist and a photographer from the Daily Mirror just 2 weeks ago, actually, and they came out with our field workers and just sort of shadowed them, chatted to them, found out about what they did. And this is, you know, their readership is probably an audience that don't know about this subject. You get, you know, the readers from different broadsheets, for instance, which their opinion on the matter will already be formed. But we thought that the Mirror is somewhere that perhaps they don't already have an opinion or an awareness of this subject. So getting it to people like that is really key, because it's, you know, it's shocking. You know, anyone who hears about it is completely shocked and, you know, wants it to stop. So yeah, getting to a different audience in that way, through the sort of mainstream media, is one way. Also using, you know, ambassadors, you know, like yourself, Maya, and like lots of other people, spreading the word amongst younger people, amongst, you know, we've got a few sort of celebrity ambassadors now, people like, you know, Deborah Meaden from Dragon's Den. You know, she's talking to her followers on Twitter, for instance. They're not necessarily nature lovers. I mean, they probably are warm to nature, but they might not follow her because they have that sort of deep interest that we do. So that can bring it to the attention of people who didn't already know about it. I think that's really quite an exciting opportunity to explore, and there's always growing ways of trying to target these new and more diverse audiences. So watch this space. That's something, an ever evolving field.
Great, thank you very much. I think that's the last of our questions. Thank you to Jenny for coming along today and giving us this brilliant talk about such an important issue. And thank you to all of you that are watching. Thank you for spending your evening with us. So we've got a few more talks on their way. So look on our Eventbrite website, and they'll say some more information on there. And also, if you're in Sussex and you're interested in learning more about Sussex birds and conserving them, don't forget you can always join Sussex Ornithological Society's membership. If you look on our website, it's easy to do. But once again, thank you to Jenny, and thank you everyone for joining tonight, and thank you to Jono for organising once again. So have a good evening.
Thanks very much. Take care.
You too. Bye.